I want to bring in a new member of our power panel today, a special guest, Garish Gupta. He works for Time magazine. He is in Caracas, Venezuela right now. And we're going to get the latest on the situation. The opposition leader, just to give everyone a sense of what the transition is like, the opposition leader in Venezuela, Enrique Capriles, has called for, sent his condolences, and he's obviously trying to calm any sense that something may happen. Now, Garish Gupta will give us a better picture of what's going on the ground, of the reaction in Venezuela. Mr. Gupta, can you give us a sense of what's going on right now since the announcement of the death of Hugo Chávez?
Okay, it's slightly difficult to hear you, but I'll tell you what I'm saying. I'm right outside the military hospital where Chávez has been for the last 2 weeks. And he died today, as was announced by Nicolas Maduro, and it's obviously a huge deal for Venezuelans. Already, it was only announced less than an hour ago, about an hour ago, there's hundreds of people here clad in red. It's actually a very quiet scene, quite somber in a sense. People just waiting, they're waiting for news. It's not the usual screams that you get from Chávez supporters. It seems they just want more information. They want to know what's next, just like we all do, I suppose.
Garish Gupta, you're there at the hospital, as you say. It's somber. The mood, the announcement only made less than an hour ago. Was there a long expectation, given his battle with cancer, given his trip to Cuba? Has this been expected in Venezuela?
Yes, very much so. This has been expected by many Venezuelans. However, you have to caveat that with the fact that Chávez's supporters, they're not like supporters of Barack Obama or presidents that we know. This is like a rock star president for them. They really believe in it. It's a religious fervor. So for that person to die, no matter how expected it is, it's just such a shock. And I think that's why it's so somber here. They don't know how to react. They know that Nicolas Maduro, the vice president, he's not Hugo Chávez. No one's Hugo Chávez. That's what these people have just... They've known it for ages. Everyone's known it, but you don't think rationally when you're in love with a leader like this, and I think that's what's happening here.
Garish Gupta, you talk about the fervor of his supporters because Chávez was as much a political leader as a cult of personality. He had over 3 million Twitter supporters. He had his own television shows. I mean, he was populist in the true sense, and he used that populism to do some pretty controversial things. What will be the democratic or the political fallout now? Because, as you say, the vice president whom Chávez said to support in the event of his death, Mr. Maduro, he's not Hugo Chávez. There won't be a cult of personality around him. What will the transition be like? What will the opposition's reaction be like?
Well, that's exactly the question. Constitutionally, elections now have to be called within 30 days. They will pit Nicolas Maduro against Enrique Capriles, who is the opposition leader. Now, I think analysts and all pollsters here expect Maduro to win just because of the momentum, the sympathy vote, and the Midas touch from Chávez himself. Now, long-term, Maduro, I don't believe, can hang on in there because he doesn't have that same charisma that we mentioned earlier. So it's going to be very difficult. However, saying that, they're falling apart, as they have done over the last 14 years. I think Capriles has got a big job in his hands. He needs to play this very, very carefully. The transition is not going to be a year, 2 decades before this country really changes.
What will the reaction be from the U.S.? That will be very critical in terms of the geopolitical reaction, in terms of support. Obviously, Venezuela is very critical as a supplier of oil, but of course it's been at the nexus of a lot of these energy-related geopolitical conflicts vis-a-vis Iran and the U.S. What will the U.S. reaction be, and how critical is that?
Well, we saw today that Maduro was playing the old Chávez line. He kicked out 2 U.S. diplomats. Obviously, that's not important at all now, and that's forgotten with this latest news. However, that relationship, the U.S. is going to have to be very careful. That relationship is a very, very tender one. You call oil wealth. That's the big economic link. But you've also got this really powerful political antagonism from Maduro, from Chávez towards the U.S. And that might grow, actually, because Maduro needs to show this base that I'm seeing here at the hospital. He needs to show them that, he can do what Chávez did. He can rile George Bush, Barack Obama, and so on.
We're hearing now in Brazil, for example, President Rousseff there calling for 1 minute of silence for Hugo Chávez. He said, quoting, "It will sadden every heart in Latin America." Before I let you go, what's the legacy of Hugo Chávez? What kind of figure will he be in the political world of Latin America and Venezuela?
Okay. So you're asking about Latin America regionally. He's incredibly important, whether you like it or not. I mean, he is, in a sense, the child of Fidel Castro and the communism on that island. But he's the real leader. He's the one with the money, essentially. He's the one with the oil. Now, places like Brazil under Lula da Silva, they became much more moderate. And under Rousseff, who you mentioned a minute ago, they've become much more moderate. Colombia has also become much more moderate. And actually, most of Latin America has. There's a few, like Ecuador, for example, has it so much. But most of it is. And I think the death of Chavez and, the Castros aren't going to be living much longer. I think this may well be also the end of this extreme left in Latin America.
All right, I got to leave it there. Girish Gupta, I really appreciate your reaction from the ground in Caracas, right outside the hospital, where there's a gathering of thousands of Venezuelans, specifically the supporters of Hugo Chávez, as they deal with the very early reports, just an hour old now, that Hugo Chávez has succumbed to cancer at the age of 58. And his legacy now will be debated, as will the future political situation in Venezuela. Thanks, Girish Gupta. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, we continue to cover the death of Hugo Chávez in Caracas, and that's where our freelance reporter Girish Gupta is live for us tonight. You've been out and about on the streets. Describe the scenes for us, the mood on the street.
That's right. I was outside the military hospital a little earlier, and the scenes are. It's very solemn, actually. It's very. When I was out a couple of hours ago, there was sort of stunned. It wasn't silence, of course. There were motorbikes coming in, tooting their horns and so on. But people didn't really know what to do. There was lots of crying. It was a very sad scene. Sadly, I hear now that there's a bit of violence kicked off. I know some tents have been burnt down. Some opposition people were protesting in tents on one of the streets around here. And I've heard that it's a little bit too dangerous now to be outside. And I can understand that, because Chávez's supporters, they haven't got anyone to cling to now. Chávez is gone, and Maduro, the vice president, he's not Hugo Chávez. And you've also got to remember how incredibly dangerous the country is. It's got a murder rate that's higher than war zones such as Baghdad. All these people are armed, so it's a very dangerous place to be right now. Nothing major has kicked off yet, but it certainly has the potential to.
An interesting juxtaposition from your words as you talk about the high level of violence in Venezuela, which we have been hearing about, and the pictures that we've been showing live of people who are just milling about on the streets, mourners, we assume, many of whom, as you say, have been outside and relatively quiet, in a country where there is so much violence, where there is such a high rate of inflation, so many economic problems, and now an election for a new president in 30 days. What do you expect to see in Venezuela over the next few weeks?
Well, initially, we have to just remember whether we like him or not, just how big a figure Hugo Chávez is. So this laying in state until Friday, I can't begin to imagine the millions of people who will come see the body, the foreign leaders and so on. It's going to be a really big deal. He has such a big legacy in this place. He has turned this country around, for good or bad. He's completely changed it, and he has a lot of supporters here. You have to remember that. Now, over the next month, as you said, elections must be called in 30 days. According to the Constitution, Nicolas Maduro, the vice president, will stand in them, and he will be up against Enrique Capriles, who is the opposition leader. Now, Maduro is very likely to win, mainly because he's got the blessing of Hugo Chávez, who was named as his heir. Now, the question is, will Maduro be able to continue Chavismo without Chávez? Chávez was just such a powerful speaker, had such charisma. No one can really match that.
And as we speak to you live in Caracas tonight, how do you feel about the next few hours in this country with the potential, I guess, for instability? You talked a little bit about some violence that's happened tonight. How do you feel about the next few hours?
It's really very difficult to say. I just popped out of here. I'm in one of the more wealthy areas now. I just popped out to get some food. There is not a single person on the street. There's not a car in sight. Every restaurant is closed. So that tells you, okay, it's not violence here right now, but people are expecting it at least. So that tension is very, very much in the air. And as the night draws on, people are going to drink more. They're going to take more cocaine, and those guns that they all have in their pockets, in their trousers, whatever. They'll be coming out. I mean, we're going to hear gunshots tonight, and obviously we hope that it's not in anger.
All right, thank you very much, Girish. Freelance reporter Girish Gupta live from Caracas, Venezuela tonight.
Even if you didn't know much about him or his politics, you likely knew that Venezuela's Hugo Chávez was a controversial player on the world stage, domineering president of a small country that supplies a lot of the world's oil, populist hero to millions in Latin America, destabilizing world leader who repeatedly provoked the U.S., an outspoken ally to some of the world's rogue regimes. On the morning after his death, reaction seems divided by place and politics. In Venezuela's capital, people flooded into the streets in a show of national mourning. But Chávez's 14 years in power also split his country. And near Miami, Venezuelan exiles chant, "He's gone, he's gone." The crowd calling Chávez's death a new beginning. Here's a live look for you right now at the streets of Caracas. You can see people milling about there in a show of mourning. We'll be watching to see what unfolds there throughout the day. We're going to take you to freelance reporter Girish Gupta, who is in Caracas. Girish, overnight we saw crowds of Venezuelans in the streets. Can you describe the scene as you see it in Caracas this morning?
This morning, it's quite funny here that life always seems to go on as normal, even when this huge event has happened. And it's difficult to explain sometimes to a foreign audience just how big a deal Hugo Chávez was, whether you love him or hate him. And there really is that polarization here. It's not like Barack Obama or any other Western president that we're familiar with. The love for Chávez is this real religious fervor. He's this real rock star president, and people really felt for him or really hated him. And that was evidenced last night and in a sense this morning as well, but things seem to have calmed down this morning. Last night I went to the military hospital where he spent his last 2 weeks. I went to some of the more revolutionary landmarks, shall we say, in this city, and hundreds, thousands of people were gathered, and they were just in shock. It was in a sense a stunned silence over the night. As the night went on, that silence got drunker. It took more drugs, frankly, and things started to get a little bit violent. But I don't think we're going to see an outbreak of violence here. But don't forget, this is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. It's the murder rate is comparable to war zones such as Baghdad. So we need to keep an eye out for that.
And, you know, keeping in mind the polarizing figure that he was, what are you going to be paying particular attention to in the days ahead?
The days ahead will be very interesting. We're going to see this lying in state. The body's going to be moved this morning to the military academy. We'll see a lying in state until Friday before the funeral. And it's, again, we have to be absolutely aware of just how big a figure Hugo Chávez is and the people he will attract. The images that I think you're going to see over the next few days, you're going to see seas of red, really passionate people who do care for Hugo Chávez and aren't really sure what's next.
And I want to ask you about that. Politically, what's next for Venezuela? Because there was some political uncertainty in the country during the last months of Chávez's life.
That's right. I mean, the Constitution says there must be elections within about 30 days from Chávez not being able to continue with power, which obviously he cannot now. Nicolas Maduro, his heir, his chosen heir, and also the vice president, he is very likely to win those elections against Enrique Capriles, who is the opposition leader. And that's mainly because of the momentum, the sympathy votes, and frankly, the Midas touch that he has from Hugo Chávez. But the fact is that Maduro is not Hugo Chávez. Now, with all the problems this country has, the crime, the soaring inflation and so on, Hugo Chávez was able to glue everything together with by the strength of personality more than anything. Maduro can't do that. So the question is, will Chavismo continue without Chávez?
We'll be watching. I want to thank you for the update, Girish. That's freelance reporter Girish Gupta in Caracas.